The Mercedes C-Class rolled through Old Trafford on a warm September afternoon, its Spanish plates catching the attention of officers on routine patrol. Inside, a man who had spent more than 2 years living as a ghost was about to discover that time had run out. When police pulled the vehicle over on Stretford Road, the passenger offered a name that wasn't his own. He spoke with the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times, a man who had convinced himself that if this day ever came, he would talk his way through it. But the officers weren't satisfied. Something didn't sit right. They ran their checks, and within minutes, the facade crumbled.
Have you got any idea on yourself?
I haven't, mate, no.
Well, okay.
I've been away for ages, you know what I mean? I've just got back with the car and that,
Right,
you know what I mean?
Just so I can't ascertain who you are, I'm just going to put you in handcuffs. Sorry, you can put them in front.
You put me in handcuffs?
Yeah, I just want to ascertain who you are. I'll explain why in a second. What's that? Basically, I've just got information that you may be a wanted person.
Right.
So I just want to ascertain. So what's your true name?
A bit tighter, mate.
I'll make sure, I'll do them again. What's your true name, pal?
A bit tighter.
What's your name, mate?
A bit tighter than what you said.
No, that one's fine, but I'll do this one here.
What's this one here, yeah.
What's your name?
It's that one there.
Is that about you?
Yeah, that's right. That.
What's your name? Is it Sean?
What?
Are you called Sean?
Why?
Just asking you. Is it Sean?
It is, yeah.
Right, okay, you're showing once at the moment, alright, so
Yeah,
you're under arrest at the moment, alright, I'll just explain the search to you.
Sean Farrell, 52 years old, wanted by Greater Manchester Police since January 2022. The man who had vanished into the Spanish sunshine, believing he had outrun British justice. The drug dealer who thought his encrypted messages had made him untouchable. VanillaJerky had finally been caught. To understand how Farrell ended up in that Mercedes, watching his freedom dissolve with each passing second, we need to go back decades, to the streets of Salford, where his story began. Farrell grew up in the 1970s and 80s in a Salford that bore little resemblance to the redeveloped waterfront of today. This was Old Salford, a place of terraced houses and working men's clubs, where the docks had fallen silent, and unemployment carved deep wounds through communities. The Arndale bomb hadn't happened yet. The IRA campaigns were still casting long shadows over Manchester and its surrounding boroughs. It was a city in transition, caught between industrial decline and an uncertain future. Young Sean Farrell was sharp. Those who knew him back then would tell you he had a quick mind, the sort of lad who could have gone places if circumstances had been different. But circumstances rarely cooperate with potential in neighbourhoods where opportunity arrives dressed in different clothes than school careers advisors might recommend. By his teenage years, Farrell had already learned the informal economies that operated in the gaps between legitimate work. Small errands at first, messages carried, packages moved, the sort of low-level involvement that barely registers on the criminal scale, but teaches lessons that stick. He watched older men operate, studied how they carried themselves, noted who prospered, and who ended up dead or imprisoned. He was learning a trade, though not one you'd find in any apprenticeship scheme. The 1990s brought ecstasy and acid house to Manchester. The hacienda was pumping out beats that would reshape British culture, and with the music came pills, powder and profit on a scale nobody had seen before. Salford and Manchester gangs found themselves controlling access to a market that seemed inexhaustible. Young clubbers with money to spend, warehouses full of bodies all searching for the same chemical, euphoria. Farrell, now in his 20s, was moving in circles where these opportunities presented themselves with increasing frequency. He never became a frontline soldier. That was never his style. Farrell was a broker, a connector, the man who made introductions and facilitated arrangements. He understood that the drug trade operates much like any other distribution network, with supply chains, wholesalers, middlemen, and retailers. The trick was finding your place in that chain where the profits were good, but the exposure was manageable. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Greater Manchester remained one of the busiest drug markets in Britain. Cocaine arrived from Colombia via Spain, the traditional gateway into Europe. Heroin flowed from Afghanistan through Turkey and the Balkans. Cannabis came from everywhere, domestic grows competing with imports from the Netherlands, Morocco, and increasingly North America, where growers in California and Canada were developing strains that commanded premium prices. Farrell navigated these currents with the patience of a man building something for the long term. He avoided the violence that claimed so many of his contemporaries. He stayed out of the newspapers. He didn't drive flashy cars or wear expensive jewellery that might attract attention. He was, by all appearances, just another middle-aged bloke from Salford, unremarkable in every way. This was by design. The successful drug dealers, the ones who last, understand that anonymity is worth more than any status symbol. Let the young hotheads flash their wealth and post pictures on social media. Let them attract the surveillance and the warrants. Men like Farrell knew that the moment you became visible, you started dying, either literally or in terms of your freedom. The technology shifted beneath the feet of criminals and law enforcement alike as the 2010s progressed. Smartphones became universal. Messaging apps proliferated. And then came the encrypted platforms, systems designed specifically to keep communications private from prying eyes, including those of the police. EncroChat appeared on the scene, promising military-grade encryption. The devices cost around £1,500, with subscriptions running to hundreds of pounds per month, prices that filtered out casual users and attracted precisely the clientele. The platform wasn't admitting to serving. By 2020, an estimated 60,000 users worldwide were sending messages through EncroChat, many of them involved in organised crime at every level, from street dealing to international trafficking. Farrell obtained his device sometime before March 2020. He chose the username VanillaJerky, the sort of random combination that meant nothing and was therefore difficult to trace back to any real identity. In his mind, he had achieved operational security that placed him beyond reach. The encryption was supposed to be unbreakable. The devices came with panic buttons that could wipe all data instantly. What could possibly go wrong? What Farrell didn't know, what none of the EncroChat users knew until it was far too late, was that French and Dutch police had been working for months to infiltrate the system. Operation Venetic in the United Kingdom was part of a coordinated European effort that would become one of the most significant law enforcement operations in history. In June 2020, police gained access to EncroChat's servers. Suddenly, investigators could read messages in real time. They could see photographs of drugs and cash. They could follow conversations as deals were negotiated, prices agreed, shipments arranged. It was like switching on a light in a room full of criminals who had believed they were operating in complete darkness. The scale of what emerged was staggering. Across Europe, police identified murders being planned, torture chambers being built, tons of drugs being moved. In Britain alone, thousands of suspects were identified. The National Crime Agency coordinated a response that would take years to work through fully, with arrests rolling out in waves as investigators built cases against target after target. VanillaJerky was one of those targets. The messages recovered from Farrell's account painted a picture of a man deeply embedded in the drug trade. Between March and June 2020, those few months before the net closed, Farrell had been busy. Cocaine deals were negotiated at prices reaching £39,500 per kilogram, wholesale rates that indicated he was operating at a level far above street distribution. To put those numbers in context, a kilogram of cocaine cut for street sale might produce profits of £80,000 or more. Farrell wasn't dealing in grams and wraps. He was moving weight, quantities that supplied networks of dealers across Greater Manchester and beyond. But cocaine wasn't his only product. The messages showed cannabis. Deals too, including imports from the United States. American weed had become fashionable in British markets, with strains from California commanding premium prices. Farrell discussed purchases at $1,200 per pound, reselling at $3,000, a markup that demonstrated the appetite among British consumers for what the trade calls Cali weed. Cash moved through his hands constantly. One documented collection alone amounted to £5,500. Multiply that across weeks and months of activity, and you begin to glimpse the scale of the operation. Drug trafficking at this level generates money laundering problems as pressing as the logistics of moving the drugs themselves. All that cash needs washing, needs converting into something that looks legitimate. When the EncroChat hack became public knowledge in 2020, panic swept through the criminal underworld. Users who had felt invincible suddenly realised that police had been reading their messages for months. Some fled immediately. Others destroyed their devices and hoped the damage might be limited. Many simply waited, hoping they might slip through the net. Farrell was not among those who waited. The moment he understood the implications, he began planning his exit. Spain was the obvious destination. The Costa del Sol had been home to British fugitives for decades, men running from everything from armed robbery convictions to murder charges. The climate was pleasant, the living was good, and historically, extradition arrangements had been complicated enough to offer some hope of permanent escape. Police arrived at Farrell's Salford address in January 2022 to execute their warrant. They found an empty property. VanillaJerky had vanished. For Greater Manchester Police, this was frustrating but not unexpected. They had seen it before, suspects who got wind of investigations and disappeared. The question was whether Farrell would stay gone or eventually make a mistake. International fugitive hunting is a patient business. Police circulated Farrell as wanted. They liaised with Spanish authorities. They monitored for any indication that he might return or contact associates back home. And they waited. 2 years passed. In that time, hundreds of other EncroChat cases worked their way through the courts. Drug dealers, gun runners, money launderers, all facing the evidence extracted from their own encrypted conversations. The scale of Operation Venetic made national headlines repeatedly as major figures received lengthy sentences. Farrell, sitting in Spain, might have watched these developments with mixed feelings. Every conviction proved how devastating the EncroChat hack had been. But every passing month without his arrest might have fostered hope that he had been forgotten, that other priorities had pushed his case down the list. September 2024 arrived. Summer was ending. The Mercedes with Spanish plates entered Greater Manchester, carrying Sean Farrell back to the city he had fled. Why did he return? The question hangs over the final chapter of his time as a free man. 2 years in Spain should have been enough to establish a new life. Perhaps he had family matters that demanded his presence. Perhaps business interests required personal attention. Perhaps he had simply grown complacent, convinced that the passage of time had made him safe. Whatever his reasoning, it betrayed him. Officers stopped the vehicle, asked questions, received lies, and then delivered the truth that must have curdled in Farrell's stomach. They knew exactly who he was. The running was over. The British legal system moved with its characteristic deliberation following Farrell's arrest. Evidence needed gathering. Charges needed finalising. Court dates needed setting. The EncroChat messages formed the backbone of the prosecution case. Those encrypted conversations now anything but private. On Thursday, November the 27th, 2024, Sean Farrell stood in Manchester Crown Court to receive his sentence. The charges told the story. Conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, conspiracy to supply Class B drugs, conspiracy to import controlled substances, and money laundering. The judge had reviewed the evidence, the scale of the operation, the flight to Spain, the false identity given at the traffic stop. 5 years and 3 months. That was the price. Detective Constable Sajid Sardar, speaking after the sentencing, addressed the message this outcome sent to others who might consider similar paths. The investigation had required cracking encrypted communications, securing cooperation from Spanish authorities, and maintaining persistence across years. Organised crime would not be tolerated in Greater Manchester. Offenders would be pursued regardless of where they hid or how long they remained at large. These are the words law enforcement always offers after convictions like this, and they contain truth even if their deterrent effect remains questionable. The drug trade in Greater Manchester did not pause while Farrell was on the run. Other brokers filled whatever gap his absence created. The market continued serving its customers, cocaine and cannabis flowing through networks that adapt and survive the loss of individual participants. Yet something had shifted in the years between the EncroChat hack and Farrell's sentencing. The belief in unbreakable encryption had taken a severe blow. Criminals who had trusted technology to protect them discovered that no system is truly secure when governments dedicate sufficient resources to breaking it. The replacement platforms that emerged after EncroChat's fall operated under clouds of suspicion. How could anyone be certain the same infiltration wasn't happening again? Farrell's generation of drug dealers grew up in a world where physical caution was the primary protection. You didn't discuss business on telephones that might be tapped. You didn't write things down. You met in person, spoke in code, trusted only those you had known for years. The encrypted phone seemed to offer freedom from these constraints. the ability to conduct business with the efficiency of legitimate enterprises. That freedom was an illusion. The messages Farrell sent in the spring of 2020, believing they would evaporate into digital nothingness, instead became permanent records of his crimes. Every price negotiated, every delivery arranged, every cash collection confirmed, sat waiting in evidence bundles for prosecutors to present. The cannabis trade that featured in Farrell's operation reflected broader shifts in British drug markets. American imports had become fashionable partly because of cultural factors, the glamour attached to Californian cannabis culture through music and social media, but also because American growers had developed genuinely exceptional products. The premium prices Farrell charged weren't arbitrary. They reflected genuine demand for what customers perceived as superior merchandise. This represented a change from earlier decades when cannabis was primarily either Moroccan hash or Dutch-grown skunk. The market had fragmented into tiers, with connoisseurs willing to pay significantly more for named strains with documented genetics. Farrell understood this market and positioned himself to profit from it. Cocaine markets had evolved too. The purity of street cocaine in Britain had increased substantially since the 1990s, partly because Colombian producers had expanded their output enormously. What once commanded premium prices had become more accessible, though still expensive enough to generate substantial profits at every level of the supply chain. Farrell's £39,500 per kilogram wholesale price positioned him as a middleman between importers and regional distributors. He wasn't bringing shipments into the country himself, nor was he running street-level operations. His role was coordination, matching supply with demand, taking his cut while others assumed the higher-risk positions. This middleman role explains how he survived so long in a dangerous trade. The most visible positions, the importers and the street dealers, attract the most attention from both police and competitors. The brokers who facilitate transactions while maintaining distance from the actual drugs can operate for years without generating the intelligence that leads to arrests. Until they trust the wrong technology, that is. Salford itself has changed enormously since Farrell's youth. Media City has transformed the old docks into a gleaming temple of broadcasting. New apartment blocks line streets where terraced slums once stood. The regeneration money that poured into Manchester following the IRA bomb spread, unevenly but perceptibly, into surrounding boroughs. Yet the drug trade adapted rather than disappeared. The markets moved online to encrypted apps and dark web marketplaces. The products became more varied as synthetic drugs joined the traditional offerings. The money grew, fed by prosperity and desperation alike. Whatever problems regeneration solved, it did not eliminate the demand that makes drug dealing profitable. Farrell will serve his sentence in a British prison, his Spanish exile now just a memory of freedom squandered. He will be in his late 50s when he emerges, assuming standard release arrangements. What awaits him then is difficult to predict. Some men leave prison determined to go straight, their appetite for risk burned out by years behind walls. Others return to what they know, the only trade where their experience still holds value. The EncroChat investigation continues generating convictions years after the initial hack. Police estimate that British criminals alone use thousands of devices, each one potentially containing evidence of serious offences. Working through this material takes time. New arrests still occur regularly as investigators identify and build cases against users. For those contemplating encrypted communications as a route to criminal impunity, Farrell's story offers a cautionary message. The device he trusted cost him everything. The username he chose, VanillaJerky, became a label that investigators attached to evidence stretching across months of criminal activity. The sense of security those encrypted messages provided was entirely false. Technology companies will continue developing new encryption methods. Criminals will continue adopting them. Law enforcement will continue seeking ways to penetrate them. This cycle shows no signs of ending. But for Sean Farrell, the cycle has stopped. 5 years and 3 months in a cell, the price for believing he could outsmart the system. His Mercedes sits impounded somewhere, those Spanish plates now irrelevant. His Salford home stands as it did when officers arrived in January 2022, minus whatever evidence they seized in their search. VanillaJerky exists only in court records now, a username attached to transcripts of conversations its owner never imagined would be read by prosecutors. The encryption that was supposed to protect him became the very tool of his destruction. preserving every damning word in perfect digital clarity. Greater Manchester continues much as it always has. The regenerated city centre attracts tourists and investment. The surrounding boroughs muddle through with their mixtures of prosperity and deprivation. Drug dealers still operate on streets Farrell once knew, serving customers whose appetites show no sign of diminishing. But one particular dealer has been removed from circulation. One broker of cocaine and cannabis will not be facilitating transactions for the foreseeable future. One man who believed Spain could offer permanent sanctuary discovered that patience and persistence can overcome geography. The Mercedes C-Class that carried Farrell on his final journey as a free man rolled down Stretford Road on an ordinary September afternoon. The driver probably cursed his luck at being stopped. The passenger, offering a false name with whatever composure he could muster, knew in that moment that the game was finished. 2 years of hiding, 2 years of watching news from Britain, wondering if today might bring officers to his Spanish door, 2 years of living under a shadow that never quite lifted. All ended by a routine traffic stop. VanillaJerky vanished in January 2022. By September 2024, he existed only in the past tense, replaced by a prisoner number and a cell assignment. Sean Farrell, 52 years old, drug dealer and fugitive, finally caught. The Manchester streets that shaped him will carry on without him. The trade he served will find other facilitators. The encrypted phones that promise security will continue tempting criminals into false confidence. But this particular story has reached its conclusion. A courtroom, a sentence, a cell door closing. Justice delivered at its own deliberate pace, proving once again that running only delays the inevitable.